Oppenheimer is a political biopic thriller that revolves around J. Robert Oppenheimer and his time as a young professor specializing on quantum physics. His greatest contribution to military warfare, which is the atomic bomb, and the aftermath of such contribution to his life, military science, and the entire world. To start off, I want to compare it with Dunkirk, another Nolan film based on historical events. He was still solid in his direction from that movie, and the experience was immersive enough to eventually urge me to hang on to myself. However, the pacing just kind of hampered my experience to it, especially when one of the three stories it told did not leave a strong impression on me. Meanwhile, Oppenheimer only has one story to tell despite the fact that it was told in a non-linear style. With that said, I had no problem with the pacing and kept my engagement to it the entire time. Despite the 3-hour runtime, it didn't feel so boring nor tiring at all. Of course, another part of the reason why that happened is the acting. The cast is without a doubt highly impressive and did a great job in their performances, especially with Cillian Murphy and Robert Downey Jr. Everyone there doesn't just act. They are so convincing that you would feel that everything that comes out of their mouth is full of threat, tension, or heartbreak. And they contribute so much to establishing and stabilizing the tone of the scenes they are all in. Of course, the score is just a banger. When I heard Ludwig Göransson from Tenet, I underestimated him for being a knockoff Hans Zimmer until I heard his score from Turning Red, which is one of my favorite Pixar soundtracks or scores. It was also worth mentioning some of its flaws though. The plot is mildly interesting, but it feels like not every audience is hooked on every scene it has aside from the Trinity scene. Most importantly, the sound mixing has led me to understand the dialogue less than I should be, despite helping me retain my engagement towards the movie. Also, neither Kitty Oppenheimer nor John Totlop had enough screen time despite how important they are to Robert's life and trials. With that said, I want to tell you about how this movie revived the experiences that everyone needed in the theaters. I know everyone praised so much about the Trinity scene, but I don't want to skip on this one out, especially because it was the best scene in the movie and my favorite scene in the movie at the same time. The sound design, the direction, and the cinematography, they were absolutely stunning. The way its anticipation was edited is a proof of Nolan's exquisite directing style. We all know what was going to happen, yet it triggered my excitement for the beautiful horror that was going to ensue. I was cowering and clutching onto my theater seat as if what I truly feel when cinema comes to mind, as if the aspect of immersion is alive in the theaters. Then, as the button was pushed, there was nothing but silence and white light as the prototype proceeded to explode, followed by a mushroom cloud engulfed by fiery sparks and bright yellow-red flames. It was a jaw-dropping spectacle, hiding the truly horrifying nature of this scientific milestone in the history of military warfare. As the sonic waves caught up with the shock waves, it was deafening. It was a mind-blowing experience, as if it recaptures the feeling that we all missed going into the theaters. This scene encapsulated everything what cinema feels like, or what cinema should feel like. Both the technical and tonal aspects were delivered in the most perfectly cinematic way as possible, thanks to Christopher Nolan's, yet again, exquisite direction. This is a major reason why people flock to theaters again. This is why cinema is alive. In addition to that, Oppenheimer gained its popularity due to its supposed friendly rivalry with Barbie when it comes to commercial success. But it's important to compare it to its historical thriller predecessor Dunkirk instead of cultural and commercial comparisons. This film did not just improve, it soared, and that is because it focuses on a historical figure through a character study instead of a historical event. The audience not only got to know who J. Robert Oppenheimer is, but it gets to analyze and understand his motivations and emotions when he made the bomb. The film has enabled the audience to feel into his shoes rather than just watch the movie unfolding everything that's happening to him. It allows us to feel with him rather than for him, That's why this movie worked better than Dunkirk when it comes to immersion, even if Nolan had tried to do the same thing with it. Perhaps all of those emotions are better felt with the help of sound design and score by Ludwig Göransson. For instance, his curiosity and melancholy are interpreted in the score Vision. He interpreted his emotions into music instead of an accompaniment piece for the film, i.e., establishing tone or style. Another example is his panic attacks. They are presented with the sound of stomping feet gradually speeding up, shining bright white light, and even deafening silence. Moreover, his motivations and overall characterization was represented in a complex yet realistic approach rather than in a black and white perception. In fact, this perspective becomes more immersive and clearer when one would rewatch Barefoot again. However, it ended up for some people still calling him a monster for that and accusing the movie for glorifying nuclear warfare, even though the truth is that's just a presentation in a different perspective. In fact, Oppenheimer simply wanted to create an impact in the scientific community and end World War II. The invention itself was eventually inevitable when it was all about a race against other nations for power. In the end, Christopher Nolan was able to create a film which audiences are able to sympathize to a man who drove warfare into a more chaotic reality. Because J. Robert Oppenheimer is still a man who is frightened by the atrocities of his achievement, a man who is able to feel regret and sorrow by the end, a man who still has a soul despite the inevitably chaotic legacy. This is the last film from Christopher Nolan where cinema felt alive to me, ever since Inception, which is my all-time favorite from him. The fact that Nolan made a character study for someone like J. Robert Oppenheimer while providing the very essential experiences needed for cinema is just absolutely fantastic. It revitalizes the feeling we've always needed whenever we want to go watch movies in theaters. This doesn't only apply on the technical and visual aspects, as movies also improves heavily with the narrative and tonal aspects as well. It's like the opposite of what happened with the bad guys in Elemental, where visuals and the score carry entire movies despite having mediocre writing and tone. At the end of the day, Oppenheimer is like one of those films where I felt the feeling of cinema rather than seeing it.